Hey, good morning, folks.
Folks. My name is France Hong. I am the co-founder and CEO of Boodle AI, the makers of Boodlebox. Welcome to our first session of this accelerator for collaborative AI in higher education. This is going to be recorded and made available asynchronously and on demand. And thank you for joining us today. Today's section is supposed to be an introduction to collaborative GenAI for higher education. I'd like to make it interactive. So I'm going to go ahead and allow folks to talk, and feel free to jump in anytime you want, though you're not required to, of course. So what are we going to do in today's session? Let's cover the goals for today. We're going to talk a little bit about what is generative AI and explain how it's different. This is by no means supposed to be a deep dive on what generative AI is. It's a working person's knowledge. We're going to talk about why GenAI benefits students and why it should be in the classroom. We're going to talk about some of the concerns, risks about using generative AI, and then have a little bit of a discussion about how to mitigate those. We're going to explain the goal of having collaborative GenAI in the classroom. And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time going through the key principles for collaborative AI in the classroom. And then another chunk of time talking about potential applications. And in that part, I'd certainly expect and would love some participation from the attendees today. So let's go ahead and dive in. First off, who am I? Who are we? So I have a background in both AI and a little bit in education. I'm a West Point graduate, law school graduate as well. Have been lecturing at West Point for a number of years in the law department, also talk about AI and innovation. I've founded several different companies, the most recent of which is Boodle AI. Boodle AI has been around for several years, helping hundreds of teams and thousands of people collaborate and adopt AI. And so we've seen what works, we've seen what doesn't work, but we, at the end of the day, believe that humans and AI work best together. And we believe that the collaboration between humans, AI, and knowledge is the key to really unlocking the potential of this technology. Okay, so what is generative AI? We can go into a whole in-depth technical discussion, all you need is attention, the white papers, transformers. But for a working set of knowledge, right, what you need to know is that generative AI first is a type of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence are systems that in some way mimic the way the human mind works, or is at least perceived to work. And in this case, it's AI that's capable of creating new and original content, whether it's text or images or video. And it's different than other types of AI because of that ability to generate something that appears new. There's been lots of AI. AI has actually been around for 70 years, the concept of it. We've been using AI in many different ways over the decades, right? There is AI that simulates voices. There's AI that can recognize images. There's AI that processes language. There's AI that makes predictions or describes the world or even prescribes things to do next. But generative AI, with the advent of ChatGPT and others a year and a half ago, has really been a catalyst for a lot of AI adoption, though maybe not as widespread as sometimes we think. Steve Jobs once famously said that computers are a bicycle for the mind. Well, if that's the case, then generative AI is really a motorcycle for the mind. It allows us to race and go to places a lot faster. So why does generative AI matter, right? At the end of the day, people don't care about AI, they care about what AI does. And in this case, generative AI allows you to save time, do more, and achieve better results. Before generative AI, if you wanted to go from 0 to 100, you had to put in all the work, or you had to delegate to someone, or you had to get a team together and do all of the work. With the advent of generative AI, the world's a bit of a different place. With a little bit of investment at the beginning, a prompt, 10-15% of the work, you can get a 70 or 80% solution that then you can spend 10, 15, 20% effort to finalize. And so instead of having to do all of this work to get to 100% solution, you can do a little bit of work here and a little bit more work here and get to the same solution. Which means the same person with AI can perform the same work faster, most likely better, than somebody else without generative AI. And in the same amount of time, they can get a lot more done. Now, a couple things to note about this. First, note I said AI produces a 70 or 80% solution. So if you use generative AI a lot, you'll note that if you use it in an area you don't have expertise in. So for example, if I ask generative AI, how do I fix a refrigerator, or the ice maker isn't working, I'll think it's absolutely amazing because I know nothing about ice makers. So a 70 or 80% solution seems absolutely magical to me. On the other hand, if I use generative AI for a subject matter where I do have expertise, let's say I ask it a question about the law, I'll see all the problems with it. I'll see, well, this isn't quite right, or it's missing this, or it's forgetting that. And so this often happens when we use generative AI. We tend to overestimate it in areas where we don't have expertise, and we tend to see all the faults and warts and problems with it in an area we do have expertise. The reality is AI is meant to be used collaboratively. AI gets to a certain place, and then humans have to exercise judgment. They're responsible for getting the solution to a place where it can be used responsibly. And we think that this is really the role of AI in education as well, right? So there's a concern, we'll talk about that AI is going to somehow replace the educational process. Well, I guess if the educational process, the work process is designed to get you to a 70 or 80% solution, there might be a danger to that, but I think we all have higher expectations of what we want students to produce and what we want people to produce at the end of the day. And so really the question is, how do we teach people to work collaboratively with AI to take advantage of what AI can do, which is get us to a 70 to 80% solution, but then take that to the next step, right? And then use that output responsibly. I've heard people say concerns like, well, AI is going to replace us someday. I personally don't see it happen, not at the level that AI is at right now. However, while you don't need to fear AI from directly itself replacing you, I do think that somebody else using AI may end up replacing somebody who's not using AI. So why should GenAI be in the classroom? Now, we could have a whole discussion, and we will later on the accelerator, about this topic and about the necessity and desirability of GenAI in the classroom and go in depth. But at a very high level, right, we are going to be graduating students from our educational institutions that go into the workplace. And the reality is AI-enabled graduates are going to be better, happier, and more in demand in the workplace. So there was a very famous Harvard Business School MIT study done in conjunction with BCG, and it found that professionals using generative AI were actually 67% more productive, 40% more accurate, and 25% faster on average than those not using generative AI. So if for the only reason alone of producing students that are going to be more productive, effective, and efficient in the workplace, they should learn to use those tools as part of their education. Now, there's a whole discussion of when and where and how. Do you allow a freshman in English Composition 101 to use generative AI? Probably not, right? There's nuances to that question of where generative AI should be in the classroom. But needless to say, the point is, we want, I think, our graduates, if they're going to be entering the workplace, to be AI enabled for the reasons of productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness. The second reason is there was a recent Microsoft LinkedIn study that showed that workers that were proficient with generative AI were happier. That they found their workloads more manageable, it boosted their creativity, it helped them focus on their most important work, and it helped them feel more motivated, and we're just generally happier. So, if we want our AI-enabled graduates to enter a workplace where they're happier, then we should make them proficient with that AI. And the third point is, in that same study, they asked a bunch of leaders about the demand for AI-enabled workers, and the leaders overwhelmingly said that they'd rather hire people with AI skills. In fact, some 66% said in the future they probably wouldn't hire a worker that wasn't proficient with AIs. Now, there's been some question about, there's 31,000 people interviewed for this survey. What do they represent? And I get all that. But the bottom line is we are entering a world where those with AI skills are going to be more productive, more efficient, more effective, and hence going to be more in demand. And so for these three reasons, we should have AI in the classroom. So those are reasons we should. So why don't we have AI in the classroom, right? Having had dozens of discussions with higher education leaders over the last couple of months, a number of themes emerge from these educators about the roadblocks to getting AI into the classroom. The first is just simply unfamiliarity and lack of need. I'm busy, I know how to teach my course, I don't see a need for AI, and I don't know enough about AI to use it, so I'm not sure what the value add is. The second is fear of student over-reliance, right? If I let my students use AI to write an essay, they won't learn how to write an essay. It's the calculator argument, right? If I let somebody use a calculator to do math, they'll never learn math. The third is concerns about academic integrity. I don't know how to separate AI work from student work. Is this plagiarism? I'm already having problems with Turnitin. How do I ensure academic integrity if I allow AI in the classroom? The fourth is, look, I'm interested in having AI in the classroom. I'm just not sure how to integrate it and integrate it safely and effectively and ethically. And then fifth, ambiguity around grading, right? I do need to grade as a faculty member, and I'm unsure how to do that in this world. So looks like we've got a couple more folks to join. Let me go ahead and stop here and open it up to our attendees today and ask if they've heard other concerns about using GenAI in the classroom. So feel free to unmute and come on or raise your hand. Okay, looks like folks are just listening today, no problems. Okay, we're gonna talk about strategies to mitigate this over the course of the accelerator and a little bit today. I think all these concerns mirror concerns, frankly, that people have had with AI in the workplace, right? I don't know what the use cases are. How do I make sure that people are doing work that is original, that isn't going to be plagiarism and run into IP issues? I need training of my employees. How do I evaluate this kind of work? But ultimately, it's going to be a mix of training and education. There's going to be a need for some administrative guidance here as well. We are still very much in the early days. And so I think it's also in a place where we should let 1,000 flowers bloom, right? And various folks should come up with alternative ways. It's far too soon to be saying there's a right or wrong answer to any of these concerns. But I think there's a lot of room for creativity and innovation still. Okay, so we've been saying this word, collaborative AI in the classroom in higher education. What do we actually mean by that? So here's one definition. There can be others, right? But I'm fond of this one, right? Collaborative AI in higher education is teaching students how to responsibly collaborate with AI in the classroom and classwork to prepare them for an AI-enabled workplace. And to prepare them for an AI-enabled workplace in the long term means they're trying to accomplish some educational outcomes in the short term. So whether you're in an English class learning composition and writing, or whether you're in a business school class trying to master some particular methodology of analysis, I think there is a role for AI if we teach it in a way that allows for responsible collaboration to enhance the educational process. And so, some educators think this is kind of an either or, right? I can either teach or I can let students use AI. We certainly don't subscribe to that viewpoint. The question is how, right? And I think the paradigm of responsible collaboration puts people in a position to view AI as a tool, but as a kind of a unique tool, right? A tool that has so many potential applications, but that application, as the Spider-Man movie said, right, with great power comes great responsibility, it has to be used responsibly. And so there is a new paradigm here where we have to teach students how to use that technology in a responsible way. And as educators, we have to figure out the right way to incorporate it into the curriculum. And those are the discussions I look forward to having with staff and faculty as we go through the accelerator programs. I'm going to pause there and see if anybody has anything they want to jump in with at this point. Feel free to raise your hand or come off mute. Okay, we will continue then. Okay, so some key principles: collaborative AI in the classroom and for classwork. So how do you actually enable collaboration with AI in the classroom or for classwork? So I think there are some key principles that are involved, and this is one formulation. There certainly can be others. I know that there's a lot of different paradigms for the integration and application of AI. This is the one that we use at Boodle AI and Boodlebox to teach people how to collaborate with AI in a professional environment. We think there's a lot of parallels to teaching a student to collaborate with AI in an academic environment as well, but certainly welcome your thoughts as we proceed through this. Okay, so here's the principles. We're going to go through each of these one by one. Okay, first, I think that one of the skills we've got to teach students, and frankly faculty need to learn at the beginning as well, is beginning with the right use cases. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's a lot of potential use cases for AI. Some are great use cases, some are acceptable use cases, some are terrible use cases. And so one of the first things, if we're going to teach faculty and students to collaborate with AI in the classroom and for classwork, is educating people on the use cases, right? And what are good use cases versus not so good use cases. Off to the right here, you see a list. This is a list of 12, I think, core use cases for generative AI, where it does a pretty good job, right? And for those of you who have done a lot of experimentation with generative AI, I think this list is going to be very familiar to you. So first, ideation, generating ideas. This is great because you're not looking for a 100% solution. You're looking for a variety of 80% solutions that you can then turn into a 100% solution when you pick one. Summation, these large language models, by definition, are great with large language, right? And so being able to put in something, a white paper, and asking the AI to summarize or even pick out, what are the things that are of interest to a sophomore in college who is a history major from this white paper. AI does a great job of that. Revising work, obviously, AIs are tireless assistants, though I sometimes refer to them as the dumbest smart people you've ever met. Translation natively, most large language models do a fairly good job at translating from one language to another, or even one vernacular to another. Research. This is a double-edged sword. We know that AI can do good in terms of pulling information from its training data sets. We also know those data sets have data cutoffs and are limited. We know we can augment it with things called vector databases that allow you to add knowledge to a large language model and pull it out using something called RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So it's a good research tool, but you got to pick the right use cases. What are you researching, right? Recommendations. Given the right set of parameters, AIs can do a good first order set of analysis and recommendations for you. And then sentiment analysis. So for those of us who are analyzing text, this is an underused use case, but AIs can take huge transcripts of information and do sentiment analysis. Problem solving. This is probably one of the best use cases for generative AI. Getting a step-by-step potential solution to a problem that'll save you time and energy and effort into figuring out those steps. Now, you still have to deal with, how do I apply it in my particular case? How do I verify these things are right? And we'll talk about some of the later steps that help with that. The next use case is by far the core one and the one that most people start with: content generation. AIs do a very good job of generating new content if you give it the right prompt, if you give it additional materials. It can do a wonderful job, frankly. There is some concerns, rightfully so, that why do things sound like AI? Am I going to get the same content out as someone else? But this is also one of, I think, the concerns about using an academic environment. We want students to be creative. We want them to generate ideas. Is it a crutch if we let them have AI generate ideas? And so we're going to have some discussions in future seminars and webinars about what does the learning process look like, and when and where and how do you introduce AI into that process. Learning assistance. AI does a marvelous job of taking complex ideas, reducing them down, providing simpler explanations. It can develop learning pathways. As we get into different modes, I think there'll be even more opportunities to expand on that. Eduardo, you have a question.
Hi, Franz. How are you?
Good.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I like this list that you've put on the right-hand side. Could you elaborate a little bit on sentiment? That's one that I'm having a problem, digesting.
Yeah. So you can take a piece of text, say a transcript from a meeting, and say, like take a debate from a city council meeting and ask, where do you think people fall in favor of the proposal? And the AI will actually look through that transcript and say, look, it thinks 3 people are for and 5 people are against based on their language. Or here's a common business use case, Eduardo. I did this the other day. I was talking to a marketer and they wanted to come up with restaurant campaigns that were innovative. And so one of the things that we came up with was, instead of just asking the AI to generate these things out of nowhere, we actually used Perplexity, pulled down summaries of all the public comments and reviews made by previous customers who had visited the restaurants, pulled out the keywords, the sentiment that people felt about that restaurant, and used that as the basis for generating new marketing campaigns. So it's pulling out the squishy feelings that people are expressing in language using AI. Does that make sense, Eduardo?
Sure, it does. You just have to be careful, I guess, on the input, as in every single case, I guess.
Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out, bias in, bias out. Absolutely, for sure, right? And we'll talk about later about the responsibly using output. There is a line where this becomes, maybe a little problematic, right? I think some of us saw the recent ChatGPT 4.0 demonstration, and at one point somebody said, express this person's feelings, and the model said, well, this person appears happy.
Right. But I
in social media, a number of folks who were neurodiverse were gassed, right? They're like, not everyone expresses happiness the same way. We don't like this use case of AI. I'm sorry, Eduardo, I interrupted you.
No, I follow you, and I guess, I agree with most of what you said. I was just having problems, asking AI to be empathetic to some sort of, writing, because I guess that's tricky. I mean, if you give them reviews and reports, I guess, they can sort out by the words they see there.
Yes.
But sentiment, for me was more like, interpret, the sentiment on this piece. And I'm very surprised that AI can do that. I'm not sure. I mean, I just, Probably it's my own interpretation of it.
Yeah, I would encourage you to experiment with it. I think like all these use cases, right? Even within each of these items on the list, I think there are better and worse applications, right? You know, if you're looking for sentiment expressed as what people like about a particular restaurant, that's a pretty safe use case, right? If you're asking AI to do a first order analysis of a transcript and where people's pros and cons views are, it can interpret the words pretty easily. If you're asking for something very nuanced that has a lot of context to it and minutia and nuance of language, you're going to start running into trouble, right?
Thank you.
Of course. The last one, uh, so we sometimes forget that AIs began as, these are chatbots, right? And so engaging in a back and forth Q&A or role-playing scenario with them is a wonderful use of generative AI to have a sounding board. So this is a list of, you know, we've often put out to people saying, look, if you want to experiment, here's some great beginning use cases. You know, obviously the technology is always changing, and so one of the difficulties in educating students and faculty about the right use cases is those right use cases changes as the technology changes. I think this is a you know, looking at the audience, I think this is an audience that's pretty familiar with generative AI. You know, you all probably know the difference between you know, what Claude 3 is good at versus what ChatGPT 3.5 is as compared to Perplexity, right? So how do we educate students on the use cases that exist because of the models and bots? And like with any other educational method or process, these things are not clear steps. Like obviously the right use cases depends on what models and bots are available. That's the second step, and so they kind of feed into one another. Speaking of selecting the right models and bots, you know, I had a number of conversations with higher education faculty and staff who think this is actually the critical skill, which is how to evaluate a model or bot, how to interrogate and figure out the outer bounds of what these models can do, and so that we stay within those bounds instead of out of those bounds. And so there's a number of things you could consider in terms of evaluating a model or bot, right? Data access and cutoff. If you're using a core foundational model, frontier model without access to the internet, there's going to be a data cutoff. If you have one that has access to the internet or other data sources, how much access do they have? There are, even in an internet-enabled bot, for example, right? There are certain sites it can web scrape, and there are certain ones that it can't. And these nuances matter when you're using a particular model or particular bot. What's the tendency to hallucinate? You know, when it hallucinates, is it aware that it can hallucinate? How do you reduce the frequency of hallucination? We've already talked about before about you know, garbage in, garbage out, about bias in, bias out, right? Models have differing amounts of training data available to them and different types of training data. What's in that data will get reflected in the output, and that certainly can include any bias that exists in that data. Context window size, the amount of data that you can put into a model at one time without using something like RAG and vector embedding. And even if you use RAG and vector embedding, what gets pulled out in RAG? The input and output modalities. What can you put into the model? Is it just text? Is it text plus images? Is it voice? And then what can it output? You know, models right now tend to do much better with unstructured data than structured data. And you know, even if you ask it to work with structured data and it can, how good does it do? And then lastly, is there a role or a specialization that that particular model or bot has? So some of us are familiar with custom GPTs and the ability to give prompt instructions. We're aware that when you take a general model and you go ahead and constrain it by giving it a role, it does better, because instead of having to access its entire training data set, It accesses a subset of that. There are lots of benefits to doing that. But picking out the right model and bot assumes that students and faculties understand how to evaluate a model or bot in the first place and have this kind of understanding. And so one of the skills we're going to have to teach people is the ability to understand, evaluate, interrogate these model or bots, and then use that information to select the right one for a particular use case. So let me go ahead and move on to the next point. So optimizing prompts. Look, there are whole classes on prompt engineering. There are gigantic books you can buy on prompt guides. If I had to summarize it in one sentence, it's talking to the AI like it's a collaborator, like it's a coworker, like it's a colleague. We don't have the muscle memory right now of working with generative AI the way we do with Google, right? Or the way we do with Excel. We're used to technology that you tell it to do a thing and it just does that thing. And it really doesn't care about the context or about anything else you provide it. Oftentimes when people use generative AI for the first time, they'll treat it like Google, right? They'll enter the word, they'll enter Chinese restaurants into an AI system. Well, it will give you an answer, but it won't be the best answer, right? And so, how would you talk to a colleague, right? You would give background and context to the colleagues. You might give examples. And so you should do the same thing with AI, right? Start by giving it a role and context, if it's appropriate, right? I want you to take on the role of a speechwriter, right? I am preparing to give a speech to the YMCA next week. Define success, right? A good speech to me is one which is understandable, entertaining, no more than 5 minutes long. Give examples. Here's examples of good speeches I've given in the past, or here's good examples of a speech that would be similar to the one I want to give. Be clear and specific. We get in our own heads and we tend to have a pretty good understanding of what we want. Now we need to communicate that. And again, this is the same problems we run into working with human colleagues, right? No one can read your mind. Well, AI can't either. And so being very clear and specific on what you want is going to lead to better results. Breaking down complex tasks. There's a technique called chain of thought or chain of reasoning. I've seen people where they try to ask AI to do a very long, complex task all in one go, right? There's like 16 steps. It's going to struggle with that. We're not yet to the age where AI agents can take over and do all those steps. And so instead of asking AI to do something very complex all at once, we might want to break it down, right? Go ahead and draft the outline of the speech for me. Great. Now write the introduction. Now write the second paragraph. Now write the third paragraph. Now review it for readability. Now add in this anecdote. Great. Now reformat it. And the last one is super important. Sometimes people don't get the right result and they get frustrated. It's AI, the use of generative AI is meant to be iterative. And so it's okay if you don't get the right result. Go ahead and tell AI, this isn't what I'm looking for. I want something that is X and describe what you want. Or I want something that is not Y and then describe what you don't like. And give the AI another chance to refine what you're doing. So again, we could have a whole class on prompt engineering. These are supposed to be just kind of high level techniques, but in teaching students to work collaborative AI, teaching them how to optimize their prompts is going to be part of that process. And again, you can go really deep into very complex prompt structures. I actually tend to find it's easier and oftentimes better if you keep it high level and let them learn by doing. There is a growth now in using AI to improve prompts itself. I actually highly recommend that. I think it's a great way to learn how to prompt better is asking AI, hey, how should I prompt you to do X? Explain the answer. Okay, incorporating existing knowledge. So now we're kind of moving, I think, into the second half of these principles, and I think where it gets more complex, but also extremely more rewarding in terms of the return of what you're putting in. So General models are just that. They're just general. There's a whole bunch of existing knowledge that we have as individuals, that teams have as teams, that organizations have as organizations. And so when you're teaching students how to collaborate with AI, part of that process, right, I think should be helping them understand the power of incorporating existing knowledge, bringing in existing research, bringing in prior work that they've done, bringing in proprietary contextual knowledge. It personalizes the answer, it reduces hallucinations, and it greatly increases the power of what you get out of these AI models. So for example, it's very basic level, right? If I ask AI to generate an email about a particular topic, it will do fine and it will be generic. If I feed in the previous chain, it's going to be even better because now it has the context. If I feed in the previous chain and multiple examples of my responses, it's going to adopt my tone of voice. And then if I have other context related to that conversation, here's documentation, here is some web links on this, here are background materials, that combination of materials, I'm going to get an output that is far more personalized, on point, and relevant than if I just ask AI to generate an email message and I try to describe it myself in some sort of prompt structure. And so collaborative AI, one of the components to teach students and faculty is the power of incorporating knowledge into these AI systems. And there's a number of ways to do so. You can put it directly into context. You can put it into knowledge through a RAG. And there's other ways that are emerging as well. So, I've got a question here from Shani. Yeah, that's a great question, Shani. When crafting prompts, curious what type of wording fits best. Is it standard American English? And what happens if that is the best? Does it limit access to others? Shani, I don't know. Would love you to come on, and I'm going to unmute you here. If you've got some initial thoughts on that, and you're an English instructor, so you're in a better position to comment on this than I am, frankly, Shani.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, perfect. So this is kind of the big dilemma in the English field in higher ed is we have many students who, don't speak the traditional standard American English, but yet are excellent communicators. There's sort of that gatekeeper idea that, excellent grammar, perfect word choice, and a certain very style is best. And so I need to get more practice with various bots and whatnot, but I'm wondering, can they adapt to how the student, quote unquote, speaks? Or do they need to know a specific type of speak in order to get the best results? Like, is it biased towards standard American English for the American classroom? I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And being English is my second language, for all intents and purposes, native speaker. I've never really thought about it. Though I will note that in our own company, in Boodlebox, we have a number of non-native English speakers that use these systems and seem to use them just fine. So that's just anecdotal. I'd open up to anybody else who's on the call who has any experience and whether they think that unfamiliarity with standard American English hinders the ability to use these systems to their highest potential. Okay, maybe this can be a point of a future. Am I coming across the microphone okay? Love a comment.
You sound low on my end. France, for some reason, I could hear the participants much better than you. I don't know if that's the case for everyone.
Is this better?
Same here.
Okay, is this any better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay.
And if I can comment on that last point raised, half of my students in most of my classes are international students, and I do have that sort of I'm not going to say problem, but issue, at hand. So it'd be interesting to see how that conversation develops, because I will have to address that at one point. And some of them are first year students, so they are still learning, how to communicate, in writing, in good English, writing. So it'd be interesting to see how we educate them to prompt or guide them to prompt.
Yep. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. Love these discussions, and we're going to have many more of them over the course of the accelerator. The next part is just collaborating as part of a human AI team. So look, there's a lot of things that can go into this. From our standpoint, it means there is power in teamwork. There's power in diversity. There is power in human and AI working together, as we talked about earlier. There's power in a human working with multiple AIs. A lot of the deficiencies that exist in a particular AI can be offset by the use of another AI. And so we are advocates of something called bot stacking. Bot stacking is using more than one AI to complete a task that would be hard or difficult or even impossible using a single AI, using Perplexity for research, and then using Claude 3 Sonnet to draft, and then double checking the word with ChatGPT 4.0, and then bringing in a specialized role-playing bot to be a devil's advocate, right? That stacking of bots is a really powerful way to collaborate as a human AI team. And then ultimately to work with teams of humans and teams of AI. And we actually think this is the future of work. We think it could be one of the novel ways for educators to use AI. We know group collaboration is often used, right? Because A, it's easier to grade, but besides that, we want our students to learn how to collaborate and cooperate with other students, because that's how you work in the real world. Well, what if we introduce teams of AIs into teams of people? And ultimately, as I said, right, AIs get us to an 80% solution. Sometimes to get to 100% solution, it requires human beings with expertise you don't have. And so, I can use AI, to go to the earlier example, to give me instructions on how to fix a refrigerator. But if I was writing a refrigerator manual, I can't do that, right? I can take the output from the AI, but I know it's going to be an 80% solution. I need to bring in an expert. I need to talk to somebody who is a master refrigerator repair person and say, look at this output. What's the problems with it? And they're the ones who can get an 80% solution. And so that's multiple humans and AIs teaming to do what humans by themselves and AI certainly by itself, or even a combination of one human and one AI can't do. And so that collaboration, right, working as part of human AI teams, I think is the future of work, and it's something that we should begin to familiarize faculties and students with. Okay, the last and arguably probably the most important step, and the part that I think can solve a lot of the concerns that faculty have around the use of AI in the classroom, is teaching faculty and students, right, how to evaluate the output and use it responsibly. We should not take what just comes out of AI and treat it like a final product, right? You wouldn't do that with something an intern produces. You wouldn't do that with something that another technological solution, right, produces. Even though it appears that these are very intelligent systems, like I said, they're like the dumbest smart person you ever met. And so what comes out of AI is the starting point, not the ending point. And I think part of what we should do in a higher education environment is teach, right, how to evaluate the output and use it responsibly. And there's a number of steps involved in that. And here's some of them, by no means an inclusive list, right? How do you fact check for accuracy? There are systems that they simply produce a result. You're going to take it on faith. There are systems that provide you citations. So Perplexity, for example, and other web-based engines will provide you a citation so you can see what the AI produces and then go check it for yourself. That's great, right? If I asked intern to write a legal memo, I would want citations for it, and then I would probably check those citations if I wasn't sure about them. Bewaring of biases exist in the systems. One interesting way to do this is to use one AI to check for bias from another AI. That's only possible in a system that allows you to use multiple AIs from different vendors side by side. But part of this is just user education on the kind of biases that can result. Whether it's biases in the training data, where it's biases in the worldview. There's a number of organizations. We've got a couple of them involved in our higher education efforts. And one of our future sessions is going to be about identifying bias in outputs in AI systems. Look, it's respecting intellectual property, it's no secret that the frontier models, for the most part, were trained on publicly available data and and feeding it into these transformers, right? And so it's very easy to produce results that are very similar, if not identical, to other intellectual property out there. Perplexity just recently rolled out Pages. It's your ability to produce an LLM-powered kind of resource page. It's turned out in some cases those pages are verbatimly producing content, or producing content that's just verbatim of underlying training data. Bit of an issue, right? Because it's not citing to it. So understanding, where the data came from, understanding the right use of intellectual property. Part of this just boils down to transparency. And there's a discussion in the professional world about how much you need to disclose that AI was used to produce something. Obviously, in an academic environment, in almost every case, faculty are asking students to be transparent about their use of AI. In some cases, asking students to provide their prompts. We are working on technological ways to enable that transparency at Boodlebox as well. Ethical standards. So look, ethics, right, is a code of behavior that applies to a particular profession. Different professionals have different ethical standards. There are professions where use of generative AI is just not a big deal. There's others where it is an absolutely big deal, the legal profession being one of those. So whatever profession, professional standards that apply to your use of generative AI, one of the things we've got to teach students, and again, we're going to have a session on this in the future, making sure that the use of that output, of that generated work product, complies with the ethical standards of that particular profession. And lastly, and I think this is probably the high end note, supporting, not substituting for human judgment. At the end of the day, what comes out of AI should be treated like a recommendation. We need to apply human judgment, human creativity, human verification to what comes out, right? And there are many ways that AI can be used to support analysis, help us think of ideas, help us double check, but it certainly shouldn't substitute for human judgment. So I'm a recovering lawyer. I generally don't use AI to draft legal memos. There's just too much nuance. There's so much involved. I just don't trust it enough to get the judgment right. It would be very irresponsible to ask AI to analyze a particular legal situation, take that, and just simply say, this is great, right? Now, what I do with AI is I'll write something and then I'll feed the memo to AI along with all the source materials and say, evaluate this work. What do you think I got right? What do you think I got wrong? And that is supporting human judgment. I've exercised my judgment. Now I'm asking the AI to come in and evaluate it. And more often than not, it actually identifies useful things I might have missed or ways or arguments I could make stronger. That kind of human AI collaboration where it is supporting versus substituting for human judgment, I think is a very appropriate use of AI. So these are 6 principles, suggested principles for collaborative AI to teach students, for faculty to keep in mind. These can be incorporated lots of different ways. They're not by no means inclusive or exclusive to a complete list, but we think they're a good starting point to get you to a solution. Okay, this last section is going to be pretty fast. We're going to have a whole webinar workshop on this, and really, you all are the experts in this. But different ways to use AI in the classroom and for classwork, right? I think for some faculty who are not familiar with generative AI, they simply think it's all or nothing. I have a homework assignment, it's a homework assignment that I've given for 20 years, and now I'm going to let people use AI, and that just simply means that whatever I come back, I have to grade, and AI is a part of it, right? Well, that's pretty black or white, and that's one way of thinking about it. But there's a lot of other potential applications. And so I just came with 6 broad categories that reflect things that I've heard different faculty share with me. The first is using AI in a comparative way, asking a human being to do the first draft or their draft of a particular assignment. Then and only then are they allowed to ask AI to draft the same thing. And then their assignment is actually to compare the two. And this is a good way to educate students on the limitations and strengths of AI versus humans, and to start them to understand where AI could be appropriate. They have to exercise and understand the process, right, to generate this thing, but they're also seeing how AI can generate the same thing, and they're evaluating it. Second, AI, then human, right? AI drafts something, then the human critiques the results. So I've had instructors where the actual assignment is to use AI to generate something, but then the assignment is for the student to critique the results, to think critically about what the AI generated and to identify the strengths and weaknesses. Again, all about educating the students on, this is part of the ability to evaluate an AI model process. Third, human plus AI, the human drafts, then the AI is allowed to review and the human finalizes. I think this is the common use case in the professional working world. I think it's also for instructors who are more advanced students where they want to let students collaborate with AI. It's certainly an option. The fourth one, AI drafting, then human reviewing and human finalizing. This is obviously more advanced. We're now letting the AI take the first stab, but the human being is responsible for the output ultimately, and they have to integrate their analysis and their improvements to the AI draft. Now, obviously, you can only do that if the human is capable of understanding what a good 100% solution looks like. The fifth is an extension of that. That's using multiple AIs to draft and review, and then the human finalizing. And then sixth, we've talked about a bit before, which is multiple humans and AIs drafting and working together, and then the humans finalizing. This is the collaborative group project involving AI. So we're going to have a whole session on this, but I just wanted to introduce these paradigms as food for thought. Okay, we've got just a couple of minutes left. Let's go ahead and open it up to Q&A. This was meant to be an introduction to the concepts of collaborative AI in the classroom and for classwork. I'm really pleased so far already with the amount of participation. I'm looking forward to future sessions. But let me go ahead and stop there and see if anybody has any comments or questions for myself or frankly for your peers and colleagues. Okay, it looks like that's it for today then. Thank you for attending this first session on the accelerator for collaborative AI in higher education. This was meant as an introduction. We're going to go much deeper into these topics. This is going to be recorded and made available. Welcome people's follow-on questions. You can reach me at france@boodle.ai. This was a really great kickoff session. Thank you for being a part of this. Please spread the word to your colleagues and peers. We'll send a follow-up email with some information about registration. If you did not already receive your free access to Boodlebox as part of the accelerator, please shoot me a note and I'll make sure that happens. So thanks again and have a great day.